Alright, nerds. Let's take a field trip. Pack up your kids and let's head into that foggy little town that we all know and love. It'll be lit, I swear.
That's about all.
Sword sheath, kiss the return of the blade and slice shade, getting paid until my silhouette fades. Immersing.
Video games have a leg up in the horror genre by way of interaction. The only thing scarier than watching a dude being chased by a monster is you being chased by a monster. Psychological horror in interactive media is on a whole nother level. I'm sure every kid in the 90s shut their pants a little bit fighting Psycho Mantis when he read your memory card and called you out for playing Castlevania.
You like Castlevania, don't you?
Hey, you're not supposed to know that.
Eternal Darkness straight up crashes while you're playing it. There's something especially scary when a game becomes self-aware that you're playing it, especially when a game plays it straight for most of the experience. However, there are some games that know how to get into your head without the use of so-called gimmicks. While Resident Evil was growing in popularity on the PS1, there's one game that would redefine horror forever. Silent Hill is one of those games that went beyond jump scares and controller rumbles with its intense atmosphere, tragic characters, and grotesque monster designs. The original Silent Hill and its subsequent sequels are a masterclass in psychological horror rooted deep in symbolism and very personal storytelling. But this is Talking Shots. What do we look like? Smart? Shall we get drunk and deliver that sweet, sweet personal anecdote? My first experience with Silent Hill goes way back to when I was a kid with Iro, back when I used to spend the weekends. We'd stay up all night, eat popcorn, and just play video games. Silent Hill was one of them. What we didn't realize at the time, though, was how enthralled we were. As much as the game scared us, something drew us back every single night. Something kept drawing us deeper and deeper into the world that was Silent Hill. That's an effect these games had at their time. There's something about it, something macabre and personal that just makes you want to go in and explore it even more and more. Maybe it's sick curiosity, or maybe it's just the search for some kind of resolution, but there's something about this game that Resident Evil just couldn't accomplish. Development of Silent Hill started in September of 1996. The game was created by Team Silent, a group of staff members within Konami. Konami sought to produce a game that would be successful in the United States. For this reason, a Hollywood-like atmosphere was used for Silent Hill. The staff members that were assigned to the game's development had failed at their previous projects. They intended to leave Konami as they were not allowed to realize their own ideas and were not compatible with the company's other teams. According to composer Akira Yokoyama, the developers did not know how to proceed with the Silent Hill project either. As time passed, the personnel and management of Konami lost their faith in the game, and the members of Team Silent increasingly felt like outsiders. Despite the profit-oriented approach of the parent company, however, the developers of Silent Hill had much artistic freedom. Eventually, the development staff decided to ignore the limits of Konami's initial plan and make Silent Hill a game that would appeal to the emotions of a player instead of one that existed for pure shock value. A lot of what made Silent Hill 1 so terrifying has more to do with the developmental experience of the PS1 more than anything else. Dude, rum is the worst drink to drink when you're trying to form a coherent sentence. Why do I do this? The fog existed because the draw distance of the PS1 would make things pop in and out, and that's really wacky, and we can't have that in a spooky game. The really awkward tank controls were used really because nobody knew how to make a game in 3D, and, well, that was kind of how you did it. I mean, Resident Evil and Dino Crisis did it. I like Dino Crisis. That one had dinosaurs in it. Lastly was the really awkward FMVs that were used that really added to the unease as a player. Although, let's be real, the first Tekken game is the king of uncanny FMVs. Be it Harry Mason or his daughter Heather or James Sutherland, Silent Hill always gives you control of a normal person. It was never a buff space marine or a buff STARS member. Each story follows regular people into the town of Silent Hill, where monsters are manifestations of their own fears and anxieties. They're literal demons, if you will. These people aren't extraordinary in any way, which only adds to the helplessness you feel while you play these games. Of course, you gotta talk about the soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka. How do you pronounce his name? Akira Yamaoka. This show is not easy to produce. Now, most horror uses this instrument called a waterphone, and it's super spooky scary. And Silent Hill has its fair share of traditional horror sounds. The radio in the first game is an excellent example of its almost minimalist sound design. However, musically the game takes a very unorthodox approach. Portishead and early trip hop being the biggest inspiration for that first game. Tracks that are airy, but grounded in reality. It's melancholic in ways that get to you. It's alive, very much like the town of Silent Hill. Then it hits you with this. It's that attention to detail that makes Silent Hill such an unforgettable experience. From clunky gameplay to even the subtlety in the characters' animations. Everything about Silent Hill is designed to make you feel. As shocking and terrifying as the monsters in the series are, these games are ultimately about coming to terms with some kind of trauma, be it the loss of a loved one or the growing pains of adolescence. Very real fears that manifest themselves as Pyramid Head, or the nurses, or the apartment in the fourth game. Lord knows there's nothing scarier than buying your first apartment. Silent Hill, of course, went on to spawn a franchise, and with the departure of the original creative team and Konami forgetting how to make good games, Silent Hill games of late tend to fall into many of the tropes that make the horror genre stale. The imagery is there, sure, but simply grotesque does not a Silent Hill game make. This is a huge reason Silent Hill is often brought up when you talk about video games not making great movie adaptations. To the first Silent Hill movie's credit, I mean, it looks the part. It checks all the boxes, so to speak, but it fails to make you feel what those first 4 games make you feel. The movie cut characters, added new ones, tried to tie in things from the games to elaborate on the cult, but ultimately it misses the point of what a Silent Hill game is supposed to be. Sexy nurses work in Silent Hill 2 because they're supposed to represent James Sutherland's repressed sexual guilt, but you put them in a movie with no context, and all you have is a walking advertisement for Halloween Horror Nights. The greatest sin, however, is the cancellation of Silent Hills. If you've been on YouTube at all in 2014, which unless you're like 8, I'm pretty sure you were, you definitely heard about the craze that popped up on the PS4 known as PT. PT, which stood for Playable Teaser, was a cryptic demo for an upcoming horror game. It was terrifying, it was cryptic, and led the world on a goose chase for like a week. Eventually, of course, the true ending to the trailer was found, and it turned out to be a production between Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, and Norman Reedus known as Silent Hills. This was slated to be the next step for the Silent Hill franchise, and with this many creative minds, understandably, people were extremely hyped. I know I was. Like I said, I still cry. For whatever reason, however, Konami canceled the game. Look, all I want are some nice things. I just want a good game, I want to be scared, and look, you took it away from me. You took it away from me because you want to make pachinko machines in Japan, and I get that. Look, pachinko's lit, but you took away a really good game, and why do you gotta make me cry, Konami? Unfortunately, we'll never know what Silent Hills was going to be, but given what we saw with PT, it was definitely going to be the breath of fresh air that the Silent Hill series desperately needed. But f*** us, I guess. Fucking pachinko, that's where it's at. Eventually, we did get Death Stranding, but given Guillermo del Toro's absence and the major change in property, this never really turned out to be the Silent Hills game that we really wanted. You see, Konami has a history of doing this too. They did something similar with the Castlevania franchise, leading the creator to crowdfund a game called Bloodstained, which is fine. The unfounding global disappointment was definitely real, but it speaks to how influential those original games were, and they still hold up over 20 years later. Hell, even the PS1 game, in all of its low poly glory, is still worth experiencing. The spirit of Silent Hill is definitely felt in indie games today, and even with Resident Evil 7, as much as it borrows from PT, is still a great game. There's a reason people still talk about these games years later, and that's because they do what good horror games should do. They make you feel things that stay with you. The same way that the original Silent Hill still stays with me, years after playing those games on long, dark weekend nights with my boy Iro. It's horrifying and scary, but it draws you in. While gaming has changed dramatically since the original Silent Hill dropped and Konami clearly does not have an interest in making games, we still have Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and to an extent 4 in the room, which are worth playing. Good horror should last beyond the movie or the game that you're playing. It should stay with you, and Silent Hill definitely does that. So what do you think? What are your favorite memories from playing Silent Hill? Do you enjoy getting as turned during October as I do? Guys, this show is not easy to produce, so I really appreciate if you'd like, comment, favorite, and subscribe, and if you really enjoy what I do, you can hit us up on Patreon. Of course, the conversation doesn't end with this YouTube video. You can hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, the YouTube comment section, wherever. What do you think, honestly? What are some of your favorite memories playing Silent Hill, or if you've never played it, what would get you interested in playing the game? And moreover, what are some of your favorite horror games from the 90s or growing up in general? I don't know why any of you enjoy watching me get drunk and talk about 20-year-old video games, but I greatly appreciate that you do. Anyway, I'm Mike Dangerous, and this is Talking Shots.